Good morning. How are you? Or good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is that you are in the world right now. I'm joined by Rick Pursell in just a second. I think it's 5 minutes past 6 in the evening where he is in Indonesia, Bali, or Bali, Indonesia even. I'm coming to you live from Portugal in Central Europe or Western Europe. And I'm wondering where you're listening in from today, because I can see we've got listeners. We've got a beautiful show today. I'm really looking forward to this one because the subject we're talking about, the heart-centered revolution, cultivating wisdom and intelligence through the 6 heart virtues, is something that I came across 13 years ago now when I first met Rick. And I was learning about a framework that he had developed and has been using. And it stood the test of time. Isn't that interesting? So few things do. So anyway, welcome to the show. Let's bring Rick on now to talk about it. Good morning.
Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, doing really well. We're coming to the end of our day. It is 6:07. The sun's gone down, and it's been a great day. Great creative day.
Have we missed that window where you turn golden, or has that already happened?
No, that happens when I start elevating out of my seat.
Yeah, I look forward to that one. So, we're going to be talking about heart mastery, and this is something that where you alluded to it in a couple of previous shows. Some of the people that watched this show wrote in and said, "I want to know more. I'd love to know more about this process that Rick is describing." So, how did it all come about? Where do you want to start? I mean, just this is your show, really.
It's our show. It's our show. And I'm very grateful for being on it. So thank you. So I think probably let's kick off with a saying by Osho, the late Indian guru. It's not verbatim, but basically he alluded to the fact that we have made the mind the master and the heart the servant.
That's interesting, isn't it?
And what he says, what we need to do is we need to make the heart the master and the mind the servant. And that was quite an aha moment for me. It was years and years ago, but just realize how much thinking we do, how much of our life is directed coming out of our mind and our heart and our head, I should say, as opposed to being guided by and the feeling of the heart. So one is a thinking process, and the other is from a thinking process to a feeling process. So that kicked off so the question then is, well, how do I do that?
Yeah. How do you make the heart master?
Yes, indeed. And it took me down a path of looking at under every rock. And I finished up with James Mayhew, who had already mastered this and already written about it. And I did the study on it and consequently ran 7,000 hours on the heart mastery. So it's been a huge part of my life. And I'd have to say, in terms of assimilating something into my life, it's one of the biggest changes that I've made. You know, you can have an aha moment and a shift in perception, an awakening of consciousness. But if there was one set of tools that has changed my life dramatically, it would be these 6 heart virtues, which we're about to get into. And it is part and parcel of the heart revolution, is that we are becoming more heart-centered, right? As opposed to thinking. And, you know, just to clarify, there's nothing wrong with thinking. We need to be able to think things through. Yeah. But we need to be guided by the heart. What does the heart say? And according to the Heart Math Institute, the heart was the first organ in the body to be developed before the brain. So that tells you something.
Yeah.
The heart sends more messages to the brain than vice versa. It has its own long and short-term memory, and it has its own intelligence. So here we are thinking our way through life and using knowledge and intellect, when right in the center of our chest, combination of the energy center and the magnificent pump, is something that is way more profound for our guidance system. And then when we feel that we're guided, this is where I really feel I need to go. How does this feel? I check in with the heart, right? So now then I can use the mind to say, okay, I know which direction I want to go. Give me some structure, right? Give me some analysis. Give me some linear timeline to play around with, to really get some traction on moving forward. So that's how I see it. We don't want to discount the mind altogether, but we want to use these two in coherence, the head and the heart and the head in beautiful alignment and coherence. If we're in a place of fear from the ego, then the heart and the head are not in alignment. And if we're overthinking everything, then we've discounted the power of the heart. So heart coherence is part of this journey of ours. So that's the starting point.
I love that. I really.
And I know you're taking notes. So
yeah, I am.
I see you sneaking those notes in there.
Well, it's important because you actually gave me a lot of or gave us a lot of information in that really short moment in time. So, I didn't know that the heart developed first, or that it sends more messages to the brain than the brain sends around the body. I had no idea. Yes. And I might not have phrased it correctly. I mean, I'm aware of seeing, my baby's first heartbeats, and I'm aware of when that happens in the whole process of pregnancy. But that's interesting. There's always been more emphasis put on the brain,
yes.
To make all the decisions.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got Mr. M just coming in. I was hoping.
Hello, Mr. M.
Rick says hi. He says hi back.
Good.
Yeah. So yeah, I really like that, and the fact that it's got long and short-term memories. I mean, I guess we do have those instincts, don't we, where we have a feeling about somebody that we can't quite shake, that obviously doesn't come from the brain. It's coming from somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah.
Remember.
Let me tell you a little story around that, because you just reminded me of it. There was a little old lady who needed a heart transplant. I think if she was in the USA. I learned about this years ago. So the story goes along this line that she went to church every Sunday, and she was a very fine, upstanding member of the community. She would always bake cakes for fetes and everything, loved her children and her grandchildren. And she had this heart attack, and they decided in the end to replace her heart. So she had a heart transplant, and it was a very good success, but it took about 6 months to really settle in. And then she started smoking. She would have some of her kids would come over for dinner, and she would sort of look at one of the boys and say, "Do you have any of those funny cigarettes?" Started drinking, started swearing like a trooper, and they were just absolutely aghast. And they finished up, long story short, going back to the doctor and say, why would this occur? This woman has been like this all her life. Suddenly she's transformed into this not so nice character. And he was bemused by this. And then, as it turned out, and I have nothing against bikers, this guy was one of the Harley Davidson bikers crew, hard drinking, hard swearing, loving the Harley Davidson. And his heart was transferred into her body, and the long-term memory were coming up, bleeding up into her awareness.
Wow.
So That's the long-term basis, and there's a short-term basis as well, which is pretty remarkable. And since that's occurred, the heart specialists have made a note of what is checking the behavior of people after they've had a transfer, and also checking with the family. Is there any noticeable change in behavior? Because normally a transplant, you think, oh, they just go on, they've just got a better functioning heart. Well, comes with a bit of a surprise package.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of is it chimerism or chimerism? You know, where people have transplants, and I think there's been like people's DNA can adapt and change. You think it couldn't get rewritten, but when you've got something inside you that's not of your own body, but it's working within your body adapts. And I've heard of like crime stories where somebody has been implicated in a murder and they weren't like nowhere near it, and it wasn't anything to do with that, but that they had some kind of DNA replication of something that they'd had transplanted, like bone marrow and things like that. And yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that the consciousness is in the body, or that it has a resonance. Yeah, I would think that you'd break my grandma if that had happened. I'd be really upset. I mean, like you get a new lease of life, but it's not really you anymore, or is it?
Well, there's an element that isn't. There is an element, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is. It is.
So, and maybe this is something like the ethics of this we can explore at another day, or maybe later on. But I want to learn more about the heart virtues, because I know that I could easily get whipped off into a frenzy on a new subject. You know me.
As one does. As one does.
I'm like, ooh.
All right. So I set out on a path of heart mastery for myself, so I could be a better version of myself, and then taught it for 10 years. And the 6 heart virtues, sometimes called values, they are appreciation.
I need to ask you, because you always put them in the same order. Is that because one naturally comes before the other and the next and the next, or have you just put them in alphabetical order?
I wasn't even aware that they were alphabetical. That's the way I have seen them written, and that's the way I've remembered them. Because in essence, we don't use them sequentially.
Yeah.
We cherry pick what is required in any one time. For instance, if somebody comes to you, then they're in heavy grief because they've lost a family member or whatever. As a coach, I would know what they need most now is my presence, just holding presence, not trying to fix them, but I would need to flow compassion to them.
Yeah.
Right. So that would need some understanding. Right? So what we do is we can use them singularly. Appreciation is one that you can use very singularly and just appreciate what you have in your life, and even the things that we don't like. What can we appreciate about this circumstance, this person that has caused disruption, and what have I learned and gained from it? Now I can be very grateful and appreciative of that as a lesson. So that can be a standalone, but you can add other bits and pieces to it as well. Yeah. But as a solitary standalone value, gratitude and appreciation are just so important and so easy to turn around our thinking. We can get up grumpy, and then if we think, oh, I don't want to be like this, find something I can be appreciative of. Well, I love my coffee in the morning.
Yeah,
and then we can build on it. Yeah. So appreciation is the first one, and compassion is next, or on our line of sequence.
Yeah.
So to have compassion is not to try and fix somebody or sympathize on, but sympathy sympos means to feel the same as someone else. So if I was a coach and somebody was in deep, heavy grief, if I was sympathetic, right, I would feel exactly the same, and I wouldn't be able to function properly as a coach.
Yeah.
Because I too would be in heavy grief. So the compassion allows us to step back from that and just see what is in front of us with no judgment. They deserve this, or whatever horrible judgment we want to dish out. But just see the person, understand that they're in grief, have compassion for them, and just hold that space. So the next one is understanding that we're all on a journey, every one of us, and some are at a different place on their journey. Nobody's better than another, but we're all different, right? And in lots of ways, we're different and unique, because each of us has a different story. We see things from a different perspective. We have different beliefs. So there's a uniqueness about us, but there's also a similarity that we're all part of the human family. And just understanding that we've chosen to live in a dualistic universe where we will embrace both sides of the coin, the hot and cold, good and bad, masculine, feminine, day and night. We've made a choice, whether it was conscious or not. And so understand that sometimes we are going to experience some jolly uncomfortable situations, and other.
Oh no, have you gone?
And everything in between.
I lost you there for a microsecond. I think we got the gist of it. I just want to ask, and I'm sure you've been asked this before when you've been training this, what's the difference between compassion and understanding? Because they appear to have some of the same markers, like if you're sort of not judging and understanding somebody and giving them the space, like holding the space for them compassionately to really help somebody feel like they're not on their own, to help somebody feel like they're supported. How does that differ with understanding? One feels more heart-based and one feels slightly more cerebral.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering what the difference between them is.
Well, they're both heart-based. Compassion is just seeing the person without any judgment and holding space for them. Let's use that one. Understanding is I can understand how something works, and I don't need any compassion. I can understand how my computer works. I can understand how to ride a bicycle. I can understand that people who are traumatized, because I've been through my own trauma, I can understand what it feels like. But I don't understand what a heroin addict goes through, because I've never been through that track.
Yeah.
So an understanding is sort of, I've been there and experienced it, right? I know about it. I've experienced it for myself. So yeah, I understand. As the drug counselor now, I understand what it feels like to go cold turkey and looking for the next fix. And that's very different from compassion.
Yeah.
Where we're just holding space. We can hold space for somebody compassionately and have no idea what's going on.
That's a really interesting distinction. And presumably, there's going to be lots of things we don't understand directly. But we might have a similar situation and understand from that perspective, but not have a full understanding of something. But we can compassionately hold space for people, just to understand them in the emotion. You are starting to glow, so I'm expecting you to levitate at any moment. And it might be because we're also joined by Sarah Taylor.
It's all Sarah's fault.
Morning, Sarah. So good morning. I wonder, does Rick have a practical exercise for bringing the darkness and lightness into balance of our perception? I'm sure you do, Rick.
Just a minute. I'll just pull this rabbit out of this hat. Thank you, Sarah.
It's a great question.
you see, lightness and darkness are more separation. And so when we see it as the one yin yang symbol, the one experience, looking for the triune of whatever it is, right? And then that softens both sides. So the very fact that we live in this dualistic world means that we're going to have both sides of the equation, right? Either one side of the duality or the other, right? And so they both coexist. And when we bring them together, now we're not taking sides, right? Because when we take side, now we're oppositional.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of side taking going on, as you know, in the Middle East at the moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I imagine there's going to be a lot of side taking just tomorrow in Thanksgiving in America. I imagine there's lots of families come together and start to irritate each other, which is kind of inevitable, isn't it? You know, people from different generations all meeting up, or sort of feeling slightly forced and coerced into something.
Yes,
there's going to be all sorts of things going on.
Sure, and they do exist.
Yeah,
they can exist independently from our perspective. If we choose to take a side and say this is darkness, without acknowledging that, okay, this is part of a two-part equation, then it's there, and we can be embracing it. Horrific situations will put us into that place, right? Or we can choose to see it as part of one system.
Yeah. And what would that system or triune be called, that both light and dark?
Oneness
or existence, or
see, the oneness. The one that I use all the time is hot and cold. The triune of that is temperature. Yeah. Or gay and straight is human being. Republican and Democrat is human being. Or politics. You know?
Yeah.
So looking for that triune.
It's an interesting word, isn't it? Politics. Like poly, like meaning many, and ticks could be parasitical energies.
Exactly.
I like your description there. Sarah's saying, but they both exist, sometimes more darkness than lightness. And I guess going back to that sort of image that I've got in my head of, I'm trying to imagine the yin yang. And actually what I'm seeing on my desk is this old president, like camembert thing, but I'm sort of transposing that sort of yin yang symbol on it, which, you know, might be all black with a tiny bit of white and white with a tiny bit of black in.
Yes. So what you've now described is the perfect scenario. They do exist, Sarah, and one can be more profound than the other. But don't forget that the black has a dot of white and the white has a dot of black. So if we're in the dark side, we embrace what's going on. We're not running away from it. We're not denying it. We're saying this exists. This is the reality I'm experiencing at the moment. But I'm going to look for the white, look for the light side of it. What is the light side of it? I could be grateful and appreciative that I'm about to learn something about myself. So using the heart value of appreciation in this situation, look for the white side. And then when I'm in this glorious la la land site, all right, I might think, well, you're not through yet, kiddo. Right? Yeah, there's more to come. You've just had a nice epiphany and it feels good, but don't think that you're through yet. Just recognize the darkness will rise to the surface to be seen and healed and released. And just as the white will come to be seen and released into the world.
Yeah, I really like how you're talking about the dark and the light coming up to be released. Carl has spoken many times when he's had a very, very dark moment where something really pure and divine has occurred and he's felt a sense of release. I remember when my mum was very poorly with cancer, and I don't often pray or do anything with much reverence. I try just to live my life as best I can. But I had a feeling of a very sort of bright and beautiful visitation, and this very strong and bright sense of calm just filled my room, which also reminds me, you know, we were driving back in the dark the other day, and Christmas lights are coming on, and I was just fascinated by this one light, and I realized that light really does change the darkness. I do think light is stronger. I know I know I've got no real basis to put it on other than my observation. I noticed when you put a light on in the dark, in a dark room, you can see all the way through the room.
Yes.
But if you were to put like a bulb of black and shine that out in a beautiful light room, it doesn't really dim the lightness, which is a paradox. Maybe the function of darkness works differently. Maybe darkness sucks the life out of things. I don't know. But I notice in terms of brightness and our ability to be illuminated or see things with our eyes and perceive things and observe things, that light on dark appears to be more powerful, which kind of throws the balance off a bit. But I wondered what you might have to say about that.
I think I'm pretty sure it was Anita Mugiani that talked about being in a warehouse, pitch black warehouse, with a flashlight and shining the flashlight so it lands on something and you see that very clearly. But what you don't see is the unilluminated stuff. And then you turn a switch on and all these floodlights show, and they were always there, but we didn't see them.
Right.
So that's a beautiful analogy for the light that we are is rarely seen because we're covering it up with darkness and mental constructs and pain and sorrow and trauma. That light is not shone upon who we are. So when we turn that around to see, okay, I've had this trauma, I've had this upset, but who am I? Who is witnessing that trauma and taking part of this, which would then be this infinite body of light that we are. Just a question of turning ourselves around to looking for the light. And if you
or lighting ourselves up. Like
locking ourselves up, yes. Yeah.
Locking ourselves up. Or lighting. Yeah. I love that. Sarah's saying, I'm visualizing calling them both into the heart and asking the heart to balance them out. You know, I quite like that. I sometimes think it's quite useful to talk to the parts you understand as well as the bits you don't. So ask the dark what its purpose is, because you might actually find the dark's purpose for you is actually more benevolent. It might be more revealing than what the light has for you.
I think, you know, if you see everything as a gift, right? If we see the shadow side and the light side of a gift, it doesn't matter which one comes up. We're going to be gifted with some awareness. You know, we're going to be able to shine the light on that shadow side, on that trauma, that pain. We're going to be able to release it. And that will then elevate us to the next plateau of understanding. So both, but you could say shadow side, light side, the triune is a gift. If we could, if we changed our perception to see it that way.
I love that. Thank you, Sarah, for taking us on that trip of light. I love it. So we were talking about appreciation, compassion, and understanding. When we've gone through the 6 heart virtues, I'd love to see how light interacts with all of those. The light and the dark.
Well, we've got three more to go. Right. So let's roll that out now. Forgiveness is another one. When we forgive somebody, or we forgive, basically the true power of forgiveness is to forgive ourselves, fine, because we are co-creating our life. We are creating our reality.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we don't like the reality. We don't, or deny it. Right? I don't want this. Yeah, I don't want this.
That's not mine.
I never asked for this. Right?
I didn't know what to that.
blame somebody else for it. But in
Yeah.
essence, through our thoughts, we're creating the reality, and our outer world then becomes a reflection of our inner world.
Mm.
So who we need to forgive is ourselves. And it's an interesting process, because when you forgive yourself, ultimately you get to a point where you realize there's nothing to forgive.
Mm.
There's nothing to forgive, because I'm on this journey. I needed these experiences in order to bring me to who and what I am now.
Yeah.
But when we're looking at an external source, that somebody has done some harm to us and has been unkind, if we are to forgive them, we're releasing ourselves from being stuck on the time track back in the past, and we're regurgitating. Some people don't forgive a brother or mother or father or somebody for 20 years. They carry that pain and disagreement, sometimes hate, for years and years, like, how I always describe it, like a rucksack full of river washed rocks, right? And in essence, they're stuck on the time track because they're back down there regurgitating this story. He or she did this to me. I will never forgive them for this or that, blah, blah, blah. We're stuck on the time track. We can't fully move forward, and we can't come into present time and see what is going on. So when we're forgiving someone else for what they've done, we're releasing our stuckness on the time track, and now it brings us into present time. And the same applies for ourselves when we're forgiving ourselves for something that we've done. We can't change the past. So forgiveness is a big one. And we don't really need to sit that person down, right, and talk to them face to face. We can do this whole process without even having a word with them. And then we may continue to choose not to have them in our space or bother to communicate, right?
Yeah.
That's a choice we can make. We have free will of who we want to spend our time with and share our story, our life, our energy. So just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean to say you're going to be madly in love with them. You're just releasing yourself from the time track. But in doing that, when we haven't forgiven somebody, we're still pushing up against them. So when we forgive them, we take away that power. It's not unusual for that person to reach out just spontaneously out of the blue, because they're no longer pushing up against that energy that we're sending to them. So forgiveness is a big one.
Yeah, I can see it's huge. Like when you said it, I had a very sort of visceral reaction. I went, ooh. I was just like, oh yeah. Because I know when I have found myself in a place of forgiveness, I felt so light. Funnily enough, talking about the light, it creates lightness. It creates a sense of spaciousness and possibility that you don't really have before then. When I think about being not in a place of forgiveness, it feels like I'm penned in. Like you say, you're pushing against somebody or something. It feels very much like I'm compacted. So I love that. Sarah,
and sorry, go ahead.
Sarah's saying forgiving doesn't mean that what someone did was okay. It means that you love yourself so much that you'll cut the tie to the victim story it created. That's beautifully articulated. And I'm definitely not madly in love with them. Yes. When you said and you release the tension, and then all of a sudden, they may well come to you. I was thinking, I'm not going to bloody forgive them then. I don't want them anywhere near me, thank you.
And slam the door in their face. That's actually not very heart-centered.
No, it's not.
but let me put a proviso on that.
Which is why I need you to talk me through the process, Rick, obviously.
Yes. The proviso is that while we can forgive somebody, we don't condone bad behavior.
Yeah.
So we're not saying, I forgive you and it's okay that you did this horrible thing to me. No, it's not okay. Not okay at all. It's totally unacceptable behavior. but you have forgiven them and you've forgiven yourself. And now you can move on. So now we have a choice. Well, can I really trust that person who said they were a friend and then they turned on me like a rabid dog? Do I really want to spend time with that person? Is that the behavior that I want to accept? I would say a resounding no.
Yeah.
But I've still released myself, and I could still, looking through the facade, looking through the behavior, I could still love that being as myself, because that being is myself.
You're good. You're so good. So, and we can maybe talk about some practical examples that we've lived through or experienced a bit later on. Where does the next one come in? So so far we've looked at appreciation and gratitude, which I love, compassion, understanding, forgiveness.
The next one is humility, to be humble.
Yeah.
So instead of going around beating our chest, saying, I'm enlightened, I'm a guru.
You are actually kind of looking quite glowy right now, Rick, I have to say.
Oh, turn that bloody light off then. No, I'm not any of those things. I wrote recently, I'm an ordinary bloke having an extraordinary experience.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it. Not debasing myself. That's just how I see it. So humility, the lovely thing is, I'm sure we've all laid out on the lawn or on the grass or somewhere on the beach and looked up at that sky, that black velvet sky, that somebody put all those little pinpricks that the light could come through. And then all of a sudden a shooting star comes across, and we realize how small we are relative to this massive stars and we've barely touched the surface of the universe. Right? And so, and if you bring it down to the human family, our one human family, there are 8 billion bodies in this human family. What would we look like if we could take a picture of 8 billion people or 8 billion of anything and then point out our solitary body in amongst that? Yeah. So that's humility. It's just, and I often use Mahatma Gandhi as an example. There was a man that spun a homespun dhoti so that they didn't buy clothing manufactured in Manchester. Their cotton was going to England, and they wanted to protest against that. So he had everybody get a spinning wheel, and they spun their own dhoti. He arrives at number 10 Downing Street to see the Prime Minister in a homespun dhoti. To me, that was the penultimate humility. This man who had influenced 140 million people, and yet when he left his sandals, his eating bowl, and his John Lennon glasses. Except John Lennon wasn't alive at that time.
Yeah. What I really love about that is how he was a man of his word as well. Like when you tell that story, there's integrity there. I don't think I would spin. Well, I know full well I wouldn't. I don't know where I'd find time to, but I'm sure I would find, if something was important enough, I would like to make a stand. But that's remarkable. I'd never heard that before. It's really special.
And you're right. His integrity was impeccable, because many of us are afraid of doing things because we're afraid of the consequences.
Yeah.
Right? And he had no fear of death. He had no fear of death. He wasn't a perfect human being either, right? But he felt it was his duty to liberate India from the British Empire. And it was an extraordinary story. I can highly recommend reading his biography. It's a man, or his autobiographies, Amazing.
Mm.
Yes. So that's humility.
Yeah. Sarah's saying the ocean does that for me, in terms of, like looking up at the sky. We went to Nazaré, where we've got apparently the largest waves in the world. Great.
Oh, yes.
You know about it because you like surfing, don't you?
Yes.
And that's just 11 kilometers up the road from us. And
Wow.
we were quite a distance from it. And when you couldn't see people on the beach, and you could see the waves coming in, yeah, they look big. But then all of a sudden, I saw people on the beach, and then I could get this real sense of scale. And all of a sudden, I felt really afraid. I was seeing these waves coming in. They're massive.
Yeah.
When you see the power of nature like that, it's just amazing. It's
Extraordinary.
incredible.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
And walking along the beach, all that sand, all those grains of sand that used to be rocks, and have been ground down into little grains of sand. How amazing. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
So that's humility.
Really helps. I think nature is very humbling, isn't it? It can be.
Yes, it is. And the best definition I have for humility is to be egoless, because the ego would be saying, look at me, look at my car, I'm better than you, I'm smarter than you, all of that brash ego talk. And the humility would show there's no ego present.
Yeah.
There's no showing off. It's just quietly getting on with the life.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing I recognize with nature. I mean, some plants do show up, don't they? And they do look good, but they're just doing themselves. Nature does itself. It knows what it's meant to do. It knows its place. It doesn't try and be a banana palm when it's a yucca. Nature knows what it's there for, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So that's humility. And the last one comes from an old English war type statement, and it's called valor. And really valor is bravery and courage. That would be in our normal everyday nomenclature.
Yeah.
So having the bravery and courage to speak our truth, having the bravery and courage to step into our integrity and stick by it, having the bravery and courage to move out of our comfort zone, having the bravery and courage to set up a live broadcast in podcasting in Portugal, having the bravery and courage to travel alone into a foreign country.
Yeah.
There are so many ways that we can express bravery and courage, and they don't have to be, Superman or Batman sort of saving the world, but just little acts of bravery and courage. When I lived in Singapore, I always would hold the door open for people. Right. And I didn't care what they thought about me, whether they thought I was a doorman or whatever, but just I don't care what people think about it. It's none of my business what people think about me. It's their business, right? But it's none of mine. So having the bravery to just be silly, if you want to be silly, to express yourself in what way, as long as it's not causing harm, of course.
I love that. When you were talking about courage and bravery, I can imagine that, in fact, holding doors open in Singapore is actually an act of bravery, because it's not really my experience. I only went there a few times, but my experience of it was it's quite orderly, but also quite rude. Although, people behave, in a sort of kind of quite uniformed way, my experience was people didn't really like that level of extra politeness unless it was your job. So that was quite an act of courage and bravery. But actually I was brought back in, to the essence of light. Actually, not just the essence of light, but the essence of darkness as well, in the yin yang symbol. That little bit of light in all the darkness is really brave. And similarly, that little bit of darkness in all the light is also very brave.
Yeah.
Standing alone.
Yes. And I'm a huge fan of Julian Assange.
Yeah.
Look at the bravery and courage that he's expressed, right? Against massive injustice.
Yeah.
So that we see elements of it, but in essence, these 6 heart virtues need to be practiced. Use them as tools on ourselves first, so we experience the benefits of them. We see that it works, and I've never not seen it work for myself and others, because every one of these is an act of love. So when we're being appreciative of something, really grateful for what I've got, the life I have, the travels I've done, the experiences, whether they were traumatic or not, I can be very, very grateful and appreciative to it. That's an act of love to myself. Otherwise, I could be miserable and moaning and whinging about everything, right? Being very ungrateful. Yeah. So we take each one of these and we apply it to ourselves first, right? And then just notice, give it a week or give it a few days of just everything you look at and you're doing in your life, just being grateful. I'm grateful I've got a computer. I'm grateful I can get a commute to work. Whatever it is, just being grateful. That changes our whole vibrational frequency. And now we start finding that the head and the heart come into coherence, because we're not being egotistical, right? We're not being judgmental. The ego is been overridden, transcended by an act of love, and love is the highest force in the multiverse. So starting with appreciation, that's each day, practice this on yourself. Then when you feel comfortable with it, I really appreciate this person. I appreciate my boss who's arrogant and wealthy, but I've got a job, right?
Yeah.
So it tends to nullify the judgment, and that's the ego. So the ego just goes away, whimpering away, having love trounced it that time. And then you look at having compassion for yourself, right? We are, we're being faced now with extraordinary challenges. Everything is speeding up, technology is speeding up. The shadow side is rising up around the world to be seen, released, and healed, right? And so we have to have compassion for ourselves, that we are here riding this journey. We have, whether we knew it or not, we've chosen to be in this incarnation at this time. So just see yourself, you're on a journey. I say to myself, you're on a journey, kiddo. All right? You chose this, suck it up. Or words to that effect.
Yeah. Yes. I do find that quite useful sometimes.
Yes.
Because understanding and compassion and appreciation and forgiveness and humility and courage, all I can see, they all stand up, they all have legs. And I recognize that I've been in situations in the past where people have shown me understanding, and maybe because I wasn't applying it to myself, I didn't really change. After a while, people start to move away, don't they? if you're just kind of like a big sucky hole. And that's me judging myself at those times, when I was almost taking the light from the room. I was giving everything. I wonder, I guess the heart virtue needed there is courage and bravery to stand outside myself, or for somebody to have some courage and bravery to say, look, you're really not doing yourself any favors anymore. Is it time now to
and have, when you find yourself judging yourself, have compassion for yourself. Instead of judging, have some compassion. I see you, I'm here, I'm looking at the mirror, and yes, it's really uncomfortable, but I'm here. I'm standing up for myself or whatever it is.
Mm.
And then getting a greater understanding of life, so we understand ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right? So that we understand why these things are happening to us and how they've happened to us and what's happening with my body. What does the endocrine system do? What are the thyroids supposed to do? I want to know these things, so I have a much greater understanding of the physical body, the mental body, the emotional body, and the spiritual body. Understanding. Then you are equipped to be able to see others and have a greater understanding by asking questions.
Yeah.
Right? How did you feel about that decision? Not what did you think? How did you feel? Right? So now you understand
to
where they're
help
coming
people, to help keep people in the heart virtues rather than in the brain.
Yeah.
Excellent. I love that. Owen's joining us. He's saying, he's saying, hi, everyone. Late to the show. We'll watch from the start. Love to all. Thank you for joining us, Owen. It's always good to have you here. Sarah's asking, Rick, what is the benefit of the ego? You've mentioned the ego a couple of times.
I have. The ego, by definition, is a false sense of self. That means that everything that comes out of the ego is a lie. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to make it. I don't deserve this. Blah, blah, blah. All the words out of the ego are there to show us what we don't want. Right?
Yeah.
And then when we decide what we don't want, the very next question is, what do I want? So the yin and the yang are the perfect balance. The ego shows us the behaviors that we don't want. We're not very compassionate to ourselves and others, right? The heroin addict who decides to come clean is now being compassionate. He's being understanding. He's being brave, right? And he's being forgiving, and now he's understanding. So all of those things are an act of love. I'm going to clean my act up and become a fully functioning human being. That's a pure act of love.
And
the opposite
as well, isn't
is
it?
to destroy yourself, go on and self-sabotage yourself. So the ego shows us what we don't want. Our irritability, our blame, shame, regret, anger, boredom, all of the qualities of the ego show us what we don't want. And now we can make a choice. We get out the wrong side of the bed and go all grumpy. The ego is grumpy and say, I choose something different. And the choice the ego gives is steeped in fear, and the heart is steeped in love. So I love my ego. My ego's probably the best teacher I've ever had because it's been with me a long time. And when it comes up these days, I say, oh, hello, ego. What have you got for me? Oh, I've got more fear for you, Rick. Same old, same old.
Yeah.
And I say, well, thank you so much. You have given me a choice now. Right? I can come down the path of fear with you, or I'm going to make this choice consciously. I'm going down the path of love. Bye. Check in with me tomorrow.
That's amazing. I love that. I mean, you could make a really good sketch of that, actually.
Yeah. Yes.
Conversations with my ego.
Yes. Well, don't we have them all the time?
Yeah.
Every element of fear is coming from the ego. And ironically, it's a bunch of cells no bigger than a peanut in the left hemisphere.
So how does, which again makes me think of the little black dot in the sea of white.
Yes. That's there to remind us you've still got some work to do.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we don't squash the ego. We don't deny it. We don't try and get rid of it. We transcend it. We go above it. And love is the highest force. So instead of acting out of fear, we choose love and we just transcended it. Or we become humble. And then the ego can't fight that. Go and tell them how good you are. Go and show them the Ferrari. No, I won't do that. And I don't have a Ferrari. Right? Just be humble. And then, now you've just transcended the ego.
Beautiful.
The same thing happens with humility and bravery and courage. It takes courage to do this journey. All of us, Sarah, Owen, you, we've had the courage to do the direct self-inquiry, to clear away the debris that we've been carrying around, to bravely step into a different life for ourselves. So that was a beautiful act of love that we've done. And when we perfect it on ourselves, and it comes very easily, or should do, then it's easier to give this away, to act in a loving, kind, compassionate, understanding way. And this becomes your yardstick. It's one thing to know about these things intellectually. We have to embody them. We have to integrate them. We have to be a living, breathing example of it. Otherwise, we're a hypocrite. Yeah. And we will fall on our face now and again. Don't ask me, ask my wife, Lita. She'll tell you, right?
Yes, we should invite Lita on the show sometime.
No, don't do that. So yeah, I get tripped up. The ego looks for a chink in the armor.
Yes, of
when
course.
You're feeling a bit down or you're feeling unwell, now is an opportunity to stick it to them. So we're not perfect.
Sarah's saying, I'm surprised I have any teeth left. Did I miss a reference there? I don't know.
Is that gnashing your teeth at the ego, Sarah?
Oh, do you know, I think it's so much easier to see with those that are closest with us, the people we live with. I think when we've got people around us in close proximity, we really come up against all our rough edges, don't we? Yes. And if we're lucky, they get smoothed off somewhat.
Yeah. And who are we when we're on our own? Are we judging ourselves and judging other people? We've perfected putting on the social facade, right? And we see situations of people that have come unstuck, and you think, I would never have guessed that of that person. Yeah. But they had very good masks on, or they allowed themselves to go from a good place and allow the ego to dictate to them. And we've seen some very fine masters that have fallen prey to that. Yoga teachers, masters that have fallen prey to the ego. So it doesn't matter what stage, you can be at an elevated stage of awakening and still get tripped up by the ego if you don't know the mechanism of it. Right? So that's why I think these heart virtues are so important, and we should be teaching them to our kids. We should teach our kids about the ego, right? Because it develops around about 2 years of age. I watched it with our twins. Right? Prior to that, they were just these little bundles of love, right? And then you see the ego developing, and we teach them. We teach them.
Definitely. Yeah, when we hear them come back with our own phrases, that's always a bit disturbing.
I'd often say to the kids, where did you learn that? And they look at me and said, from you, Dad. Oh, damn it.
Carl and I say that all the time. Thankfully, now we can also say, where did you learn that from? And we just say, oh, it must have been YouTube. We can take ourselves off the hook, but really didn't. Sarah's saying, I'm surprised I have any teeth left from falling on my face. And is the ego a personality or the personality?
Well, it has qualities, just as the heart has these 6 heart and more, right? The ego has it. For instance, it has the quality of fear, separateness, superiority, judgment, cynicism, victimhood. They can all be part of our new persona. We could be living entirely through the ego, or we could be living entirely through the heart, or we could be of a combination of both.
Yeah.
So it forms part of our personality, our persona. But the only problem is the ego is a lie. It's a false sense of self. It's not who we are. When the ego's saying to us, you're useless, you're never going to make it. And the infinite self that is animating this body, right? Says, oh, really? Right? I'm infinite. And you are telling me I'm never going to make it. You're useless. You're a failure. The world is you're a victim or whatever. It's just chatter. It's the monkey mind chatter. And we have two voices, the voice of the ego, which is always louder, and the voice of the authentic self, right? Of the heart. And the ego tends to override and shout louder than the heart. The heart is coming through our intuition from the intelligence of the heart, just nudging us gently, feeling there. But we're so attuned to living in our heads. Well, that's where we've been taught to learn, and to live from, but at the exclusion of the heart. All of that's changing now. This is part of the great awakening that's happening on our planet. Is the movement from the head to the heart-centered revolution, cultivating wisdom and intelligence.
Very good. And a lovely reference to the title there. Thank you. I've got this big stretch. I feel like I've got to stretch into all this information. I'm also aware that I'm not using it effectively enough in my own life. So thank you so much. I think I might take the conversation with the ego as a fun little concept to us at home. So I might say, oh, hello, ego, and see what comes up, and see if we can turn it into something funny.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Love it.
I love it.
It's the old saying, love your enemies, it drives them nuts.
Yes, it really, I'm sure it does. And final thing from Sarah, is the ego the dark side of the heart? Ooh.
The heart doesn't have a dark side. Only the ego does.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The heart is filled with love and compassion, and these heart values, and tenderness and kindness, and being of service. The ego has the dark side.
Very cool. I love how the dark and light has played out in this conversation. So thank you so much, Rick, for today. Thank you, Sarah, for showing up as usual in the chat room with so much insight. Thank you, Owen, for joining us, and for the other people that have been listening in, lurking in the background, but hopefully not lurking. Like, lurking sounds like such an awful word, but thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Rick, really, really appreciate you for this. I understand it must have been quite quite a bind, because your daughters are home and you probably want to spend time with them. And yeah, you're a wonderful, wonderful person. Thank you so much. I love you.
Thank you. I'm just a reflection of you.
Bless you. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And we'll see you again soon. We'll be back on in 2 weeks. Are you still up for that,
Yes.
Rick?
Yep, I'm up to it for sure.
Excellent. And we will be back on Friday. Sarah's going to be joining me on Friday. We haven't actually decided on our topic yet, but I'm sure we'll have some fun sort of conjuring up that one. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and hope to see you again real soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.
Big love from Valerie.